Hello, this is Daniel King reporting on round 3 of the London Chess Classic. I wasn't actually attending the tournament today. I had some business to take care of, but that's given me a little bit more time to actually look at some of the games in more detail. And in fact, I really only want to look at one game in my report today. Of course, there were 4 games. 3 of those games were drawn. Kramnik against Carlsen was a draw. Kramnik had an edge but didn't get anywhere in an ending. Aronian against Anand, also draw. Anand was better but couldn't force a win. And Jones against Nakamura. Nakamura pressed for some time, but again, a draw. There was never really any great winning chances. So the game I'd like to concentrate on is Michael Adams against Kramnik Polgar. Before we look at that game, I'd like to show you something from 2 years ago in the London Chess Classic. The game between Magnus Carlsen and Nigel Short, last round 2 years ago. Let's just very quickly have a look at that because there is a similarity with today's game, Adams against Polgar. So let me just go through these moves. It was a French defence. I repeat, this is Carlsen against Short from the London Chess Classic 2 years ago, and Short lost this game very badly, but let me just show you one particular position which has a bearing on what we're about to look at. So this is a very standard French Rubinstein variation, knight e5, and Short made the liberating break, c5, and Carlsen simply took and allowed an endgame. Now, at first glance, this doesn't look too bad for black, having broken down white's centre. But Carlsen played an excellent move here, which I think Short had really underestimated. The bishop no longer achieves much on this diagonal when the queens are off the board. Carlsen simply played bishop e2 here. And Short thought for a very long time and really didn't come up with a very good response. The point of this move is to bring the bishop to the long diagonal, and you can see how difficult it is for black to complete his development. Well, for a start, the bishop cannot come to d7 anyway because the knight covers. But of course, if b6, then the bishop is going to come to f3, and c6 is weakened, and black is already in huge trouble. So bishop e2 already set Carlsen on the road to victory. Actually, he won a very smooth game indeed. Now, bear this in mind when we're about to look at Adams against Polgar. I hope you'll see a similarity in a second. Polgar played c5, knight f3, e6, and now Mickey Adams played an English speciality, actually, g3. Well, in fact, we saw last year there was again in the London Chess Classic, Luke McShane played this against Hikaru Nakamura, and Nakamura played d5, which I think is probably the best response. And now d4. You can see why white left the pawn on d2. It means you can play d4 in one move. Okay, it was a complicated game. McShane had a little advantage, but Nakamura neutralised it. But this is an interesting way for white to play. But Polgar played knight c6. Okay, of course, it's a normal developing move. Bishop g2, knight f6. And now, if white plays something like d3, then this can lead to a very normal King's Indian attack type position, or indeed queen e2. But Adams played queen e2, and we'll see the point of delaying d3 in a second. Okay, d5 from Polgar, and again d3 will bring it back into more normal lines, although this is an interesting position to play for white because this is actually an old Bronstein speciality. And now e5, and again we can see the point of delaying knight d2 because white often plays c4 here and actually puts the knight on c3. This is actually a recent game, or it's a well-known position, but Garwayne Jones played this recently as white, So it is quite an English speciality, this opening. But very surprisingly, instead of d3 here, Adams took on d5. Now, this looks very modest indeed, but you'll see this actually has hidden venom. Castles, okay, all very normal, and bishop e7, black must develop. And now rook d1. Again, we can see the point to delaying moving the d pawn, because this is going to go to d4 in one move. Now, black could try to preempt d4, and in fact to prevent it with, for example, knight d4. There are various ways to achieve this, knight d4. But this can lead to rather a favourable Benoni position. I know white's position doesn't look like much here, but actually this pawn structure, well, you can see it's a Benoni pawn structure with colours reversed. And actually white has a very, very comfortable, very pleasant position here. Also means you can use the f pawn quite quickly as well. Or bishop f6. Well, on the surface of it, that looks a very plausible move to prevent d4. But I think knight c3 is an excellent move. If black castles, then the knight will come to e4, the bishop has to go back, and then you'll play d4 anyway. That's one possibility. And if this knight is taken, then suddenly white has enormous pressure. These bishops, well, as in the game, as we'll see, just scream down the diagonals, and white already has a very pleasant position. Okay, so it's not so easy to prevent d4. But is it so bad? Well, Polgar clearly didn't think so. She castled. Adams played d4. Now, think back to that Carlsen short game I mentioned right at the start, and here you'll see a similarity. Michael Adams' bishop is already on this long diagonal, screaming down the board, and that makes it very difficult, again, for black to develop the bishop on c8, and this is and in combination with the pin on the d file, this is already very, very awkward for Polgar actually. Well, okay, she knocked the rook back, and the bishop is on a nice diagonal as well, but it's not so serious. Okay, so queen c7 played. I mean, these moves look normal. Now c4, so this bishop is coming down the diagonal. Now this knight has various moves, but it seems so it's very difficult for black to solve problems in the position. You could play knight b6, but then simply knight a3, threatening, at some point to play knight b5. If bishop d7, then bishop f4. Well, this is rather similar to the game actually. As we'll see, this is very pleasant indeed for white. These bishops absolutely beautiful, and particularly having weakened this square as well. Okay, well, let's see what happened in the game. So the knight came to b4. Okay, simple development for white. Now what happens if black simply plays bishop d7 here? If black can play bishop c6 to challenge the bishop on the long diagonal, then everything will be fine. Should be fine. But watch what happens. Okay, knight e4 with a threat. It's all forcing. If the bishop goes back here, and bishop f4, you can see that black simply doesn't have time to consolidate this position, because something is going to land on d6. It's very nasty indeed. And if e5, the tactics are in white's favour. We can take, and rook takes. White is simply a pawn up for nothing here. Well, in fact, with a fantastic position, because b7 is of course very weak. And sorry, after bishop d7, knight e4, bishop e5, of course we can just hit the bishop, and the bishop is running out of squares. And there are funny tactics here. If black tries to cling on like this, okay, the bishop moves back, and now it's a very strange tactic. In the middle of this, there's a funny double attack. So it is not simple for black to develop the queen side, and there are problems. Okay, so Polgar wanted to prevent knight b5, and she played a6. Okay, seems fine. But Adams, this is his kind of position. The moves just flow so easily. So of course he wants to land the bishop in here, so that forces e5, and the bishop came back. So with this clever move, He's nudged the pawn forward. Now the bishop is blocked in, and this square, crucially, is weakened. So let's see how Adams exploits that. I mean, really, his strategy is so straightforward. When you see Mickey playing games like this, you realise how strong a player he is. He makes these games look so easy. So, I mean, these moves are forced. So he's weakened the d5 square. He's managed to give himself a monster of a passed pawn here. And, well, after this, I mean, Black's position is so bad that, you know, in the long term, I think we could almost say this is lost. You know, Black has no activity, and of course it's a kind of position that Polgar hates. She is a brilliant attacking player, but there is no counter-attack here at all, no counter-attacking possibilities. She must have found this game very, very unpleasant. Okay, she tried rook c8, but nothing doing there. Now you can see, once the bishop locks itself in there, then this bishop is still screaming down the board. b7 is just a target. It's absolutely horrible. Okay, she tried here to, you know, exchange off the powerful bishop, but actually you'll see in a moment that the queen just took its place. Bishop takes. Well, of course, Black can't recapture with the queen because the d pawn just stomps home. So pawn takes, and now queen e4 takes the place of the bishop, blockades the pawn, so this bishop is still horrible, and of course the rook as well. And this pawn is just dropping off. It's terrible. If b5, well, okay, the queen just goes in. Okay, we can just about stop the d pawn, but queen takes a6. White is cleaning up here. There is simply no counterplay. Polgar tried bishop g5, but this made no odds. There's nothing to do here now. The e pawn is attacked. This is attacked. And queen takes b7. Well, really, this position is all over. I mean, Polgar struggled. She tried to find some counterplay, but there is absolutely nothing here now. How many pawns? 2 pawns up now, still with this beautiful d pawn. Polgar has, well, a tiny bit of activity, but after this, well, I don't think we need to go any further. You can see that White has a completely winning position, and Adams won 6 moves later. So a really smooth victory by Michael Adams. Remember, last year he scored 1.5 out of 8 in the London Chess Classic. This year, well, 1.5, excuse me, yeah, 1.5 out of 8. Only he made 3 draws and 5 losses. This year he started with 1.5 out of 2. Yeah, he's already had 1. He's only played 2 games. So, well, we wish him all the best, and I hope that he does much better this year. But he's off to a good start. Judith Polgar seems in slightly shaky form. I think, you know, she's rather out of practice, and I think so far that's telling. So, after 3 rounds, Carlsen and Kramnik share the lead with 2 wins and a draw each, with Nakamura and Adams on 1.5. Thanks very much for watching. More roundup shows in later rounds of the London Chess Classic.